Turquoise, the highest of the altitudes that people generally group in. You can cut up these altitudes any way you like, so that you could conceive of Teal as being two different ones, with a lower Teal that begins to recognize paradigms, an upper Teal which begins to see a pattern of development in these paradigms. And then when you get into Turquoise, you're starting to see an interparadigmatic tendency, which is to not just be so focused on these stages of altitude development, but how those would arise in individuals as well as groups, as well as all of those different spheres would be covered: the self, the phenomenology, the culture, brain structures, and also the interpersonal institutions that would enable Turquoise consciousness. It can be sort of difficult to tease apart the differences between Teal and Turquoise in particular, being that these are so rare. Teal is paradigmatic, while Turquoise tends to be interparadigmatic or transparadigmatic or multi-paradigmatic, which in Wilber's mind, that is to incorporate the quadrants and the various lines and the interrelationships between lines. In particular, the quadrants, though, recognizing the individual as an instantiation of a group, and that how those patterns echo, which is elegantly put in the statement, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, which is to suggest the structures that arise within you echo the structures that have arisen historically. Consciousness through history as well as through your own history. So this is where we're seeing this now interparadigmatically. If Teal has not yet found an interest in states of consciousness, certainly Turquoise will. Turquoise starts breaking that barrier into a curiosity of states and how states can become state stages, which is what we'll get into next with Indigo. It would be typical of Turquoise to notice that there is a difference between a state of consciousness and a long-term stage of consciousness. The individual rises and falls over time and has peak experiences and has no stable structure to speak of, but rather is in a constant flux of different states. Again, with the granularity of the model, you could make it any granularity you want, just as if you imagine the geological time scale, we tend to cut up epochs into moments that interest us. If there's a major asteroid impact or something which shakes up the global climate or creates mass extinction, that's what defines an epoch. Similarly, with these altitudes, we can draw these lines anywhere we want, anywhere that's useful. One can debate whether the distinction between Teal and Turquoise as two different integral memes, whether that is valuable and essential. Whereas Teal can begin to see these models and frameworks and use them, Turquoise tends to interrelate them. So that's a new sort of behavior. Turquoise may also begin to integrate types as well as streams and lines into their own conception, regardless of how they think of it. One thing that may be found contradictory sometimes is in the word holism being applied different ways. You might find green to be holistic, you might find teal to be holistic, you might identify turquoise as the holistic one. I think that's the current trend for turquoise to be considered holistic, whereas all three would be considered holistic in a certain sense. Green always being opposed to any notions of hierarchy, with teal and turquoise both being in favor of what Wilber calls growth hierarchies based on a desire for positive change. The more wise and the more capable rising up the ladder, and that their positions as teachers and leaders being necessary and useful and good and beneficial, being a major difference from the more green individualistic, tending to be sort of anarchic or anti any sort of authority, tending towards even communistic principles of self-government, libertarianism. A lot of those come along with that green meme iconoclasm that's so typical, or paradigmatic style. Second tier sees itself as a conscious choice-making witness of this environment and this body that has certain systems of control that allow it to partially control the body and the personality and social interactions in the world around it. You're not this person or this voice or this mind. You're a pilot of all of that. You're present, experiencing all of that. You're not being a person, but you're like puppeting a person almost. So it's kind of anti-humanist or inhumanist, transhumanist. Teal's self-sense tends to be very agentic and chameleonic, one might say, where we would say Teal is sort of a method actor in life, that they genuinely feel these things, but they are, to a certain extent, role-playing in their relationship with their body and with others. Turquoise tending to be a more lived in, more comfortable expression of the self, just having gained a certain facility with all of these different levels, is tending to be more relational and less focused on the self, more focused on others, how others fit into their conceptions and communal actions, the impact of the whole, the focus on the whole, with the hope of creating organizations or communities based on inspiration and growth, hierarchies of growth. Beyond here, we get into the speculative and to do with perceiving different realms of awareness, which could be called spiritual in nature.